The first part of this story ended with our hero finally getting to Elizabeth's mansion. Since no one was aware that the guy had to come, he had to get into a little conflict with the relatives. But when he showed the personalized invitation, everything immediately fell into place. After a delicious dinner, the girls went to their room to do their own thing, and Charlie was left with Oliver to entertain the guest until Elizabeth got home. In the course of the conversation, the boy was given a unique gift, namely a fake school ticket to use as a cover for himself. Since Oliver has recently become a member of the Paranormal Bureau, he's bound to have some sort of fake ID that he can show to the police, or in some public places. But frankly, he didn't like being made a schoolboy at 24. She was very angry, but suddenly she came back to the kitchen, and without any further ado, she turned to Oliver and demanded that he give her all his money. Of course, the guy did not tolerate such insolence, and immediately asked her why he had to give him all his money. After these words, the girl even thought about it a little, and said that she would not mind to borrow them, but when she got a negative answer again, she started to get mad. Then Tatiana also came up to them and tried to explain that it was very important, because their friend's father had lost a large sum of money. If the money is not returned today, the only stall of the classmates' family will be completely looted. Since this is their only source of income, they will be left with absolutely nothing. Of course, even on such terms, Oliver refused, because such a favor would not fix the gambler in any way. Of course, the guy is right about something, but in Katerina's opinion, you cannot be so indifferent, and such a greedy person is not worthy to be a member of the Bureau of Paranormal Investigations. And then she turned around and, while leaving, declared to the whole room that she could handle this problem on her own. As soon as the girls left the room, Charlie immediately asked the boy to help Katerina. The main problem is that her power is not inferior to an adult gifted. The elders are constantly trying to leave her here, because in other places she just cannot be controlled. Unfortunately, what Charlie says is true, because kids are very impulsive these days, and since Oliver has found the bureau on his head, he can't stay away. When he heard the positive answer, he was very happy and thought that they would go together, but Oliver preferred to do it alone. During a previous visit to his inner world, the guy discovered something interesting. In general, the cells of monsters and other living creatures are able to exist in his body, but for some reason they cannot crossbreed. Against this background, because of inactivity, monster genes are basically just sleeping. But as soon as our hero gets into a critical situation, the dormant genes are immediately activated, and he goes to the second stage of awakening. This is his trump card up his sleeve, the very power that comes out of nowhere at the most opportune moment. Also, a peaceful but more defiant spirit takes part in this process. It contains all the combined advantages of the peaceful inhabitants, and stimulates the monster's uncontrollable genes to work properly. The boon of this power is enough to overpower some local vagabonds. Meanwhile, the owner of the gambling business together with his friends sat in the very cafe of his debtor, and ordered a lot of food without stopping. Now the man's wife and daughter work there, and it is quite difficult to say where the culprit of the celebration is at the moment, probably still losing money somewhere. The mother tries to pretend that everything is fine, but at one point she just can't stand it and starts crying. Then she approaches her daughter with a request to take the food to their table, and says that her father owes more than 200,000, they just have no other choice but to cook endlessly. The main problem is that the girls are simply not able to resist the head of the gambling business, so the mother is madly hoping that if they will weigh themselves well, then the bandits will just get away from them, and further go to deal with the father, because in fact, all this is solely his fault. As soon as Marina approached the table, the bandits paid special attention to her. Of course, because of this, girl began to worry a lot, and could hardly pronounce the name of the dish. She had never been so scared as now in her life, because she didn't even understand what to expect from these people. This time the bandits decided to make fun and at the first opportunity began to bow to the girl and thank her for bringing food. But as it turned out later, this is only the beginning of the show. Harry, further business owner, said that Marina should only say, and he and her father immediately become like one family. Then her mother suddenly bursts into their conversation and declares in front of everyone that Harry is a very important gentleman, so he will definitely not do anything wrong. But if he dares to do any harm to her daughter, her mother will not let it go. After these words, Harry began to laugh out loud, because he has something very interesting in his hands, which really at the level of the law will allow him to inbreed with Marina. Anyway, to go gambling once again, the father officially sold his daughter for 2 million, signed the document, and left his fingerprint there. At this point the girl had a real shock, because she could not even think that her father was capable of such a thing. But anyway, today Marina is already obliged to go with them, because she has no other choice. Suddenly, a car drives up to the establishment at a great speed. From it there are shouts that Marina will not go anywhere. As it turned out, it was finally arrived Katerina and Tatiana. Of course, no one took them seriously, and did not even assume that these girls could oppose them at all, because the bandits are protected before the law because of their father's signature. Tatiana begged her friend not to make any unnecessary movements, because if they accidentally harmed ordinary people, they would be deprived of their abilities once and for all. At least this time Katerina decided to obey and act according to a premeditated plan. As it turned out, the girls still managed to get money to pay off the debt. For this they had to pull out all their savings and take large advances on account of future awards for monsters. Frankly speaking, for the sake of saving their friend they went to the most extreme measures, but do not regret it a bit. However, now the girls will hear not the most pleasant news, because the 100,000 that they bring is only a small part of the debt. Because the father has already managed to sell his daughter to this gang for 2 million and sign a real document. Katerina's anger was simply unbounded, and in general she assumed that in their state such a transaction in principle cannot be legal. Then Marina's mother broke into the conversation again. To put it mildly, she was not happy that there are 2 new girls who are trying to take part in their family problems. To try to stop the angry mother somehow, Katerina began to say that they were Marina's classmates, and had come here for one purpose only, to try to help her friend. But even in spite of such a frank speech, the woman was still against their being here. So if the girls were not going to order anything, their mother urgently asked them to leave the territory of the establishment, and they would deal with their problems without outsiders. At this point Marina completely lost faith in any positive outcome, and was ready to accept any fate. In the opinion of the mother of these girls, even approximately do not understand what is 2 million for their family, but it is not surprising, because they are majors growing up without sadness and cares. At one point Katerina simply could not stand the nerves, and she urged the ungrateful woman to shut up. Such anger at her appeared for a reason, because at least Tatiana is not some rich girl who grew up in a happy and carefree family. Literally in the recent past as a small child, she was just thrown out on the street, and left to her fate. As suddenly the guys heard a very familiar voice. It was Oliver who came to help the girls at Charlie's request, but so far they don't even know about it. To at least understand what's going on here, the guy sat down at a neighboring table, made an order and continued watching. When asked by the girls what the guy was doing here, he replied that he was just passing by, got hungry and decided to have a bite to eat at night. But unfortunately, because of the situation, the owner of the restaurant, instead of accepting the order, said that there were no more seats and asked to come back another time. Of course, our hero decided not to give up so easily, because he saw with his own eyes that there were plenty of vacant seats around. In this case, the bandits decided to come closer to him, and culturally tried to explain that at the moment they are solving some of their issues here, implying that they do not need outsiders here. But even so, Oliver continued to pretend as if he didn't understand anything, and asked the bandits how their important negotiations felt about him having a nice dinner tonight at all. Meanwhile, in his head, Harry was thinking that the boss might like the 2 little girls, too, as long as he didn't scare them off. As soon as the boys had laughed enough, they decided not to drag it out too long, and tried to explain to Oliver why it wasn't a good idea for the bandits to ask stupid questions in the language of pain. All this time Katerina was trying to understand why the guy had come here. He was fed up with life. Tatiana was equally anxious, because she realized that if Oliver used physical force against them, he would be violating the rules of the Bureau. which could eventually lead to expulsion. Katerina, in turn, did not even allow such a theory, because she was sure that the guy is as weak as possible and cannot oppose them. Deep down, Tatiana realized that this is not true, because the guy became an official member of the bureau at the personal invitation of the commander. This happens very rarely. Oliver, in turn, despite being attacked by several bandits at once, instead of pretending to be scared, just sat there and smiled, because he knew that ants could never bring down an elephant. First decided to try to strike the biggest one of them. But in just a few seconds he was lying on the floor, trying to understand what had happened. At the moment of contact between his fist and his head, the bandit felt incredible pain, because of the fact that the guy awakened, his body became several times stronger, and for a normal person it feels like a piece of heavy metal. Harry was also shocked, because he could not understand what kind of monster was standing in front of him. Then Oliver defiantly approached the bandit lying on the floor, and asked him why he was lying here. Looking at all this from the outside, the boss began a strong panic. He immediately realized that this is not an ordinary man. Then, out of desperation, Harry pulled out his knife, pointed it at Oliver, and asked him what he really was. The kid said it was the wrong way to put it, and then he took a toothpick out of his mouth and threw it right into the wooden sign. The poor boss's eyes were the size of 5 kopecks, because he'd never seen anyone break a wooden sign with a toothpick in his life. Well, this time the bandits decided to leave, but promised to come back, because Oliver has no idea who he is in contact with. When it was over, the girls were madly happy. For some reason they were sure that the bandits will not come back, although the chance of this is very small. Marina started crying with joy. She was madly grateful to her friends, and didn't even know what she could offer them in return for their help. When the girl calmed down a little, she offered to feed the guys as a token of gratitude. Of course the girls started to refuse, but Oliver happily agreed to do so. It wasn't that he was impudent, or wanted to be paid for his work, it was just that the guy was really hungry and simply couldn't miss such a unique opportunity to eat at the expense of the place. Marina agreed without any problems and said that everything would be ready in 10 minutes. Despite this happy ending to the day, his mother was still unhappy with him. She thought Oliver had only made things worse and that things would be much worse in the end. In response to this aggression, the boy said that it was not his fault, because he had just come in for a snack and they wanted to beat him up. Of course, no normal man would tolerate such treatment, so it was necessary to make the bandits suddenly want to run away. Then Oliver turned his attention to the girls in the back and asked them to sit down at the table so they wouldn't be in the way. Meanwhile, the mother was trying to say that just because Oliver chased the bandits away today, it didn't mean they'd never come back. But even so, the guy had one very strong argument, which he was deliberately delaying until the very last moment. So far, he purposely shows complete indifference to the situation, so lasted anyway until the woman fell on the floor and began to cry loudly, allegedly because they no longer have a way out. Then Oliver finally said that he ruined not the whole family, but only one of its members, namely the mother. After these words she immediately lost her tears, because she finally realized what all this time smoothly brought the guy. In general, if we talk about the usual debts, they really picked up Marina's father, but sold her daughter for 2 million. It was her mother, so only she will have to explain to the bandits. After these words, allegedly poor and unhappy woman became madly angry, because she could not understand how Oliver managed to find out this secret information. By the way, speaking earlier, the guy about it only suspected, but now he is convinced 100%. Then Marina came to the table, and frankly speaking, after hearing the information, she completely lost her mood and desire to somehow live in this world further. When the mother realized that her daughter already knew about everything, instead of apologizing, she began to try to justify herself somehow. In general, if the girl does not agree to marry this bandit, the whole family is super over. In this case, the mother simply has nothing left but to beg her daughter to sacrifice herself and save their family. Despite such a tragic conversation, Oliver decided to spit them out and asked to cook more food. To be frank, Katerina didn't really like the way Oliver was talking to her friend, because after what she'd been through, it was better to try to comfort her at least somehow, instead of bossing her around and chasing her into the kitchen. In response, the guy said that if the girl really wanted to, she could go and comfort her instead. At the same time, the mother did not stop telling her daughter about the current problem. As it turned out, the father has not slept at home for several days, which directly symbolizes that most likely he was caught by the same guys, and will keep locked up exactly until Marina herself will not come to them. After the girl brought the food, Oliver thanked her profusely at first, but when he tasted the meat, he immediately remarked that it was too tough. Apparently the girl had accidentally overcooked it, but as soon as she said that she was going to recook it, the guy left the table and said that he had lost his appetite. Frankly speaking, it is quite difficult to describe the reason for such boorish behavior, as the guy so much did not like the attitude of the owner of the restaurant to him. In this case, the girls also decided not to linger, wished Marina a good rest, and also went home. When finally all parted, with tears in her eyes, Marina told her mother that for the sake of the family she will marry a bandit, no matter how hard it was for her to realize the fact that everything will be through force and not for love. But she still does not hold a grudge against her mother, and will go to this desperate step. After these words, the mother was madly happy, and was sure that now her daughter is waiting for the happiest future. When the girl went back to the table to clear the dishes, she found that one of the guests forgot his bank card. Now it is interesting to find out whether it belongs to the bandits, or not. Meanwhile, Katerina was running towards Oliver, full of anger. She wanted to teach him a lesson for all those ugly words she had said to their friend. But as you'd expect, her strength wasn't even close, so no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't hit the guy. She was trying to tell him that Marina was suffering and needed to be treated very gently. At one point Oliver was tired of listening to this nonsense, and he turned to face her and asked who she thought she was, and what right she had to behave like this toward her elders. She also added that if the girl continues to make a big deal out of it, Marina won't get better. If anything, she needs help with actions, not words. So if the girls do not want to see their friend always with her head down, they should go to her right now and give her moral support. After these words, Katerina finally calmed down, and frankly speaking, she didn't even know what to say. Suddenly the guys heard that someone was approaching them. It was Charlie. He reported that he had managed to follow the bandits, and now he knew their exact location. Of course, he would not have done it without Charlie's instructions, but he did it well. Despite the huge risks, he found the strength and secretly followed the bandits right to their location. After these words, Katerina was shocked, because she realized how much the boy had planned. Tatiana was standing to the side, and silently admired Oliver, because she had never thought that he was such a professional at what he was doing. There was definitely a reason why he had been hired by the Bureau of Paranormal Investigations on special invitation. Despite such useful information, the guy was not in a hurry to rejoice, because such serious bandits may have more than one headquarters. In this case, Oliver urgently asked the girls to return home, and he himself, together with Charlie, was going to go for additional reconnaissance. Katerina in turn began to oppose, and insist on going together with the guys, because this case directly affects her best friend, and in general she still cannot understand why the guy could not immediately tell that he has everything pre-planned and not to make nervous. Frankly speaking, Oliver didn't want to see her and his team, and he didn't even understand how she could be of any use. The area the guys were going to was not a paradise. Given Katerina's obnoxious character, she would only get in the way and slow down the process. Then Tatiana entered the conversation. She supported the guy and said that let the boys check the situation, in case it's never too late to come to the rescue if you really need it. In principle, Katerina agreed with this, but she really wants to be useful in this operation. In spite of such strong eagerness to help, the guy was sure that taking her with him was the same as trampling down the path to hell. The girl is very impulsive and has never been involved in such serious tasks before in her life, so she might do something stupid and screw up the whole team. And the problem with this girl is that she has a very rough character, which has destroyed her femininity and made her look like a man, except for her figure, of course. By accident, Katerina noticed that Oliver was looking at her, so he had to compliment her to get out of it. It sounded something like this: "Nice top to cover your airfield, babe." But unfortunately, she took it not as a compliment, but as an insult, which once again confirms the complete lack of femininity. Katerina was so angry that she was ready to strangle the guy. But of course, since Oliver is a pretty strong guy, he won't let himself get hurt. Meanwhile, Marina was watching this idol from the sidelines. She noticed how close the guys were to each other, and realized for herself that she didn't want to get them into any more trouble. As soon as the girl came close enough, she immediately informed the guys that apparently one of them forgot something in the cafe. Then Oliver abruptly stopped and said that he had left a card on the table, see 200 yuan, in order to pay for tonight's dinner. From this statement, Katerina assumed that Oliver was a major, but in fact he was not. He just borrowed money from his boss, and as soon as the next paycheck came in, 200 yuan would be deducted from his card. But even so, the girl still chose to give it to him as a token of gratitude for his help. After that, she said that the situation had already been sorted out. The guys didn't have to worry about her anymore, and they could go home with a clear mind, because it was already dark outside. Oliver also refused to take the card, but Marina strongly insisted on it and actually put it in his hand. How wonderful it would be to suddenly find an easy way out of Marina's difficulties, but since there was none, Oliver would first have to visit those who had wronged her. Then she went to her friends, and also informed them that the matter was completely settled. But deep down the girls realized that tonight was only the beginning. When Marina was left alone, she gradually began to realize that support from friends will no longer be. One day the bandits will once again come to their cafe and will definitely take Marina with them. No one can help. The girl already owes so much and does not want to get stuck in it even more. To speed up the whole process, it was decided to take the phone in hand and call the number that once left Harry. Thus the girl directly contacted the bandits, told them where she was, and literally within 15 minutes a very expensive car arrived at her door. A very decent man came out of it, opened the doors for the girl and informed her that her new outfit was in the car. Now the main task was to get in and change quickly. At this moment Marina was mentally saying goodbye to her friends, apologizing to them and asking them not to look for her anymore. Before leaving, the girl left her cell phone behind so that her friends couldn't track her through geolocation. After a while, Oliver tried to call her, but when there was no answer, he realized something wasn't quite going according to plan. The guy immediately notified the others and asked them not to panic, because he and Charlie were already in position, watching what was happening right next to the bandits' lair. Suddenly, after only a few minutes, Oliver noticed that a black car had pulled up to the building. A little closer through the tinted windows, the guy managed to see Marina's silhouette in it on the back seat. After that, he turned to Charlie and told him to wait for him in the attic and be ready to react to instructions at any moment. It was very important. There had to be full concentration. Looking at Charlie's frightened look, the guy began to worry, because he thought that his assistant might not be able to cope with such a responsible task. But he found the strength to pull himself together and said that he promised not to fail, and it was also important to remember that the reputation of the Supernatural Investigations Department was at stake. As soon as the conversation was over, Oliver took out his umbrella and headed toward the hotel entrance. Meanwhile, on the top floor of the hotel was the boss, who was the founder of all the gambling houses, and from today the official owner of the marina. The name of this serious man is Jack. Every time the driver comes to his room, he is extremely stressed because he never knows what to expect from him. This time he came to inform him that at the moment Marina was already on top of him in the restroom. Jack said he accepted the information and let his servant go downstairs. Frankly speaking, the boss's joy was unbounded. Apparently he had been waiting for this day for a long time, and Marina was a really desirable woman, whom he had managed to get only in a bad way. Meanwhile, the guys finally got inside the hotel. At the entrance they were greeted by a huge number of workers. The funny thing is that they were extremely beautiful, well-groomed women. At the reception desk, the guy said that he wanted to book a room here and specified that a standard room would be enough for him. After just a few minutes of registration, everything was completely ready, and the guys could safely proceed to check in. On the way, the guide began to offer to take advantage of various promotions that are available at the moment, but because of the limited budget, the guys were interested in only one thing at most: where is the toilet? As soon as Charlie heard the exact coordinates, he immediately went there at breakneck speed. In general, the man wanted to accompany him, but in this case it would probably be unnecessary, so Oliver offered to continue the excursion together, and his friend would find everything himself afterwards. Of course, no one objected, and the guys went straight to the karaoke bar. Inside, Oliver was waiting for a large amount of booze, various snacks, and beautiful color music. Everything was just on the highest level, but there was only one thing missing, namely a large number of beautiful girls. In this case, the guy wanted to fix it and asked the man to invite them here as soon as possible, but unfortunately the answer he got was not positive. The fact is that this is a regular karaoke bar, and here do not provide this kind of services. To be honest, the guy was shocked. He didn't even think that he would be turned down. But even so, he was still not confused, and decided to use his trump card up his sleeve, namely to offer to pay with the client's VIP card. Of course, under such a pretext, everything is immediately in favor of the client, especially when he pays as much as 50,000 yuan for the girls just to dance here. As soon as the employee opened the door, 3 beautiful ladies entered the karaoke bar from the next room and gently greeted the guy. But not even 5 seconds of their presence here, as Oliver realized that he did not like them at all. This is not what he expected to see for such a large amount of money. So not thinking long, the guy asked to bring other girls, and then repeated the procedure about 5 more times, while tipping his assistant. In the end, the assistant was so tired that he decided to bring all of them at once, because in his opinion, Oliver could only choose so much, and that was not a sure thing. In the end, as you might expect, the guy once again didn't like anything, and because of his bad mood he even insulted his assistant. Of course, he did not like such treatment, and made a remark to Oliver, in which it was said that if a man has tens of thousands on his card, he should not make himself an emperor and give others trouble. The answer to such insolence from the employee did not take long to wait. Because the guy, to put it mildly, did not understand that he was causing trouble at the moment, when they were paying huge sums of money to this institution. Without thinking long, the man grabbed his radio, called the guards, said that one of the guests was making a disturbance, so it was necessary to deal with him as soon as possible. Also, this hotel is very famous for the fact that every guest who made a disturbance in it, broke some things and so on, received an instant response from the guards, and at best left here in an ambulance. But as it happens, our hero is not afraid of anything, and will gladly wait for the guards. After about 20 seconds, 3 huge pumped-up men walk into the karaoke. The funny thing is they even have themed uniforms. The first thing the employee did was complain, talk about everything in all colors, and only after that the guys started to slowly approach Oliver's side, to try to explain to him how to behave properly in such establishments. Of course, the guy would not allow anyone to educate himself, so he decided to take a long drag, and gave one of the guards a strong kick from his foot right on the stomach, after which he screamed and fell to the ground. The other 2 were shocked, to say the least, because they couldn't even think that such a skinny guy could stand up to them. But despite their non-aggressive attitude, Oliver decided not to stop, and to fight them all at once, so that next time they would think before they did anything. As a result, after only a few minutes, all the detractors were lying on the floor, and were in severe pain in absolutely every part of their bodies. Then the guy again approached their chief, took hold of the umbrella, and began to demand that he be taken to his boss's office. Oliver always works on this principle: if you catch bandits, then start the leader, because if you capture the boss, under strong pressure, he can be forced to let all the others go. Meanwhile, Jack was preparing to get to know his new wife, but it is still unclear why her hands are tied and she is on her knees. As suddenly one of the mercenaries runs into their room, and reports that downstairs raged some visitor, but he is simple, but very strong and probably gifted. Immediately after these words, the mercenary received a good blow to the face, so to speak, to calm down a little, because no one after breaking the rules did not enter here in one piece. Jack then asked to turn on the security cameras to see where the intruder was. Jack then asked him to turn on the security cameras so he could see where the intruder was, and the man concluded that he was most likely a member of the Paranormal Investigations Bureau, but his face was unfamiliar, probably a rookie. Harry also joined the conversation after the viewing, saying that he was the guy who had stood up for Marina in the street diner where she worked. Frankly, Jack didn't think anyone would even want to go to her rescue, because Dad was happy to sign the sale document. He is also in this room, tied to a chair with his mouth taped shut. As soon as Jack snapped his fingers, one of the mercenaries took the tape off him, and he started begging for forgiveness from his daughter, saying he was sorry for what had happened, and that if he could turn back the clock, he would never do it again. But it was too late for him to think of the consequences. In the end, because the man was yelling quite loudly, Jack got a headache and urged his employee to make the hostage shut up. The saddest thing in this situation is that all this is happening in front of the daughter. It is even hard to imagine how morally hard it is for her to watch how some thugs beat her father without pity. In the meantime, the matter of the intruder remained open, so Jack ordered his assistant to go down as soon as possible, and make sure that the problem did not trouble him anymore. Of course he agreed and proceeded to carry out the order without fail. Jack then turned to Marina and asked her what the name of the guy downstairs was, but since the girl is very loyal and never tells information about her people, this time she also decided to keep quiet, despite the fact that she could be destroyed right now. But at least that wasn't going to happen anytime soon, because Jack couldn't afford to go to that much trouble to get her here and then just destroy her, because for now, he was interested in her as a beautiful, luscious girl in a white dress. Then, in the process of conversation from the man's mouth, began to come out some obscure shadow, which eventually took the form of a spirit. After already being in this form, Jack began to say that if he absorbed Marina, he will certainly be able to develop his abilities for at least 100 years to come. This was due to the fact that the girl was born on a very rare date and has incredible power, which is not even suspected. But in order for everything to be successful, Jack needs the baby to voluntarily give her energy, because only in this case everything should be successful. When the story was over, instead of agreeing to continue living happily ever after, Marina started screaming again and telling Jack not to come within 1 meter of her. Apparently she just doesn't believe him, but that's not surprising, because you can't trust people like that. Jack also decided to share that some people call him 003, but among the common people he is known as the Devil. Meanwhile, Oliver confidently moved towards his goal. Despite the fact that in one hand he has a hostage, he has no problem coping with other mercenaries. For this he uses only one of the umbrella. As soon as the information came that the office of the boss at the end of this corridor, the guy immediately got rid of the hostage, so as not to get in the way. Right at the end of his journey, Oliver met another group of mercenaries, who were as angry as possible, and tried to warn the guy not to go any further, but as you might expect, all these warnings were ignored, and they had nothing left but just to attack. But instead Oliver grabbed his fist in flight and twisted it as hard as he could, probably hurting the man as badly as he had never hurt him before in his life. The situation with the second bandit is a bit simpler. Oliver just dodged his blow and struck back directly in the stomach, after which the opponent flew a few meters away and crashed directly into his colleagues. Probably he has broken all the ribs, and at least for now he will not be able to walk. Oliver decided to attack all the others without wasting a minute, because it would be much faster than waiting for each of them to come in and attack on their own. As suddenly on the way the guy began to feel something strange. First he felt some strange aura, very similar to the devil, and secondly he began to hear the voice of Marina. But now the question arises, where can there be such a powerful aura? While Oliver was making his way towards the boss's office, Jack kept on mentally draining the girl. He kept telling her that her savior was never going to get out of here and that he would be finished soon. Of course she tried to resist, but it was getting harder and harder each time. So far, her mind is dominated by the fact that she is very worried about Oliver and would not mind him leaving here, because this whole operation is too dangerous and could end up with a far from positive outcome. A little later, Jack says that he let Oliver get this far on purpose, arguing that Oliver's body is disgusting because it has been significantly damaged by drinking and excessive smoking. According to the boss's calculations, it will never fully release his personal energy. So against this background, Jack is not afraid of anything and is fully confident of his victory. So now it's time for the boss to say goodbye to Marina. He has only two ways. The first is to destroy the girl, then the guy will no longer see the point of being here, and the second seemed to him personally. And then he is afraid, just run away from here, forget about the girl and about all his duties. After hearing this, with tears in her eyes, the girl shouted loudly for Oliver to get out of here as soon as possible. The girl shouted loudly for Oliver to run away from the place as soon as possible. The previous guide had been a lie, because the boss was actually on the 16th floor, and it was accessible by a staircase in the outer hall. As soon as Oliver learned the truth, Marina's voice came into his head again, and this time he heard her begging him to leave. But as you might expect, the guy just took the information the other way around, and instead of leaving he started running towards the girl, only with even more enthusiasm. He even decided not to finish Harry off, but we'll find out later if that was a mistake or not. When Oliver finally climbed to the penultimate floor, there he was waiting for another surprise from the boss, in the form of his best assistant, who is ready to do everything for the benefit of his master, even to give his life. But his peculiarity is not only in this, but also in the fact that he is not the weakest in himself. Looking at him, the guy immediately realized that he was a gifted man, at least that was symbolized by his beastly gaze, and in time Oliver also realized that his potential rival was secretly trying to use the illusion skill on him. Before everything started, the mercenary asked the guy to leave, otherwise he would take his life. But even on such an unpleasant proposal, our hero had something to say. Because he is not going to leave and is not going to lose his life, he has a little other plans that he is sure to realize, despite all the obstacles that await him ahead. In this case, the man decided not to prolong this meaningless conversation, and attacked the guy as sharply as possible to create the effect of surprise. And frankly speaking, he really succeeded. The guy immediately realized that he had no time to dodge, so he decided to start the process of devilization. Since it is launched as quickly as possible, the damage from a mist hit the guy did not get. And when everything was completely ready, he even complimented the mercenary, since his attack speed is really not bad, but the strength, to put it mildly, did not sell expectations. With this level he cannot definitely hurt Oliver. The devil cells also formed a unique armor, and Oliver was beginning to get the feeling that his defensive abilities had increased more than tenfold, which was a good thing. The mercenary was in a state of bewilderment at this time, because his strike was too weak to be effective. After a few more seconds, the guide began to feel how his strength and attack speed increased several times. Now, at least on these parameters, he is not inferior to his opponent and can fight on equal terms. Based on everything that happened, the guys concluded that Oliver gifted snake type. After that, they have not long thought to start a battle. Two powerful forces have collided, and right now they are finding out who is stronger. But despite his immense power, so far the guy's inferior, and since the mercenary has decided to show who he really is. As it turns out, he is an awakened eagle type, which means that his fighting power is much greater than what he originally showed. He is also insanely motivated by the fact that in nature an eagle will always be stronger than a snake, and against this background he doesn't even allow himself to think that he might lose. So far, despite such a beautiful presentation, and a lot of loud statements, Oliver has no problem blocking all the blows. But the main question is another: how long he can do it. Because according to the opponent, even if the guy wants to, he still cannot touch him. In his heart, the guy realized that there was some truth in these words, because he really is not easy to maintain the speed of the opponent, so it is necessary to find a way to limit his movement as soon as possible. Before attacking once again, the mercenary used his wings to create a strong wind to distract attention. But as it turned out later, Oliver made it look as if he had lost his coordination, so that the opponent would be completely relaxed and would not expect any trick. This would allow him to use his abilities at the right moment. As soon as this opportunity arose, of course the guy did not miss a good chance to use the power of spider cells, and slowed down his opponent with the help of the web. Honestly speaking, the mercenary was maximally surprised, because he could not even think that a person of snake-type awakening has the ability to use the web. Oliver in turn was also no less surprised, because before he could only use spider cells to create spikes for climbing walls, and now he can create a real web. In general, with the perfection of the kingdom of cells, his powers are gradually developing, which just cannot help but be happy. As a result, with the help of his skills, Oliver almost completely tied up the opponent. Now at least he will not be able to fly. Got an annoying fly. Probably the man does not even yet suspect what to do in this situation, because he could not even think that this could happen. First of all, he started to say that calling him a fly is not correct, because by nature he is an eagle, and demanded to let him go. And secondly, he thought that the fight would be fair, but instead the guy used a secret weapon. Of course, nobody's gonna let him go. He'd better be thankful he wasn't destroyed. After these words, the opponent calmed down a bit, but still he was just madly curious to know how a snake-type gifted person could use the web. But as soon as the boy clarified one small detail, everything became clearer. He never said that he was a snake-type gifted person. Meanwhile, Jack was sitting in the room, and just could not believe his eyes. His best employee had just lost in a private duel to some guy. But even despite such a disadvantage, he continued to run Marina that Oliver was about to lose his life, despite all his successes. The closer Oliver got, the more he began to feel this demonic energy. The more he began to feel the aura was so scary that he began to feel uncomfortable, to say the least. Previously, the guy only once felt a dark aura, the first time it happened near the reservoir, when he encountered a dark entity. Such aura causes an eternal feeling of something bad. In general, it does not matter who is behind the door, man or dark essence. In any case, it is necessary to make maximum efforts. As suddenly Oliver heard Marina's voice again, only this time it was real, and he realized that the girl was right outside the door. At least the guy was very surprised to realize that Marina was aware of his whereabouts. He also theorized that whoever was inside this room must have already assessed his strength and fighting style. All the while, the girl kept telling Oliver not to come in here, because there was just a huge chance that the guy would never come back here again. Jack noticed how much the girl was worried about him, but at the same time he didn't forget to remind her that something terrible was about to happen, after which the boss would continue to live in this world using Oliver's personality, because everyone who dared to go against him would become his food. Then he activated his abilities, and thereby made a large release of energy, the background of which was a small explosion. Now Oliver knows exactly where his goal is, and in what direction to move in order to accomplish what he has come such a long way to do. Meanwhile, colleagues from the Bureau of Paranormal Investigations were still busy hunting various spirits. Right now they were moving towards one of their targets, but for some reason the energy fluctuations suddenly disappeared. This is a direct indication that this spirit has been caught before, and now to save his life he is in a constant trickery, and tries to confuse the guys. Suddenly Ben receives a new notification on his phone, which says that Oliver is in trouble and urgently requires help. To be honest, the guys could not understand what was going on, because Oliver should be on vacation, and no one could not assign him a task. How come he got into another trouble is quite difficult to explain, but nevertheless the message came, and we need to think of something. Calling him on the phone is definitely not an option, because it could very well be that he is going to the battle site or is already fighting. After literally 30 seconds of thinking, the guys realize that they need to break into that place before the guy is defeated, otherwise the mission will be failed. On the way it was decided to check if there are any energy fluctuations in the karaoke area. After a little analysis, David said with certainty that there are 3 energy flows intertwined in that place, but he is not sure that at least one of them belongs to Oliver, because all of them are extremely powerful. But even with such an ambiguous verdict, the guys decided to head there anyway. In this case, they could only hope that they still had time. Ben wanted everything to be all right, because Oliver had just joined them, and he couldn't let it be over so quickly. As soon as the guys left the place where they were working, the very spirit, whose energy fluctuations they felt, came out. Judging by his satisfied expression, he was just madly happy to be released. But now the most important thing is that he did not do anything bad. Meanwhile, Oliver was about to enter the fight against Jack, and frankly speaking, he felt unsure of himself, but it is not surprising, because the opponent is superior to him in all respects, and several times. The only thing he can hope for is that his friends arrive on time. Earlier the guy had assumed that Jack had stolen Marina because of her beauty or because he wanted to profit from her takeover. But now he realized for sure that it wasn't like that at all, it was more serious than he had imagined. Before Oliver's duel began, he asked him who he was, or more accurately, what you were. For some reason Jack got a big laugh out of the phrase "what are you?" But to be frank, he himself has not perceived what he is for a long time. Also the man added that if the guy is from the Bureau of Paranormal Research, he must have heard of him, because there they call him Monster 003. Turns out it's the same evil spirit that Ben and the other Bureau members are chasing. To be exact, the guys were looking for him all over the province, and he just hid in this apartment building. Oliver's spirits are high because he's the first one to meet him. In this case, the guy was fully ready to act, and in no case was not going to give in, because such a chance falls with his once-in-a-lifetime, and the most important thing is to use it correctly. But unfortunately, even such a strong charge of positive energy, it does not cancel the fact that the opponent is quite strong. Jack dodged the guy's first attack without any problems and immediately struck back. He had so much speed that he just could not react in time. As a result, after the missed blow, the guy flew away at a great speed and ended up with a hard blow against the wall. Even a guy's forehead that's harder than a diamond, when reinforced with rhinoceros beetle cells, can't take the hit. In addition, you have to take into account the fact that Jack doesn't even use the gifted's power yet, so the guy doesn't even know how to attack him. While the duel paused a little, Marina decided to ask the guy again to send his thoughts to her and run away from here as soon as possible. But in response Oliver said that this will not happen, because he has gone too far, and simply cannot afford to take and back down. Does Marina really want all of Oliver's previous victories to be in vain? The guy also reminded her that Katerina and Tatiana are just madly awaiting her return. And speaking of Jack, it's hard to imagine why he took Marina hostage, but whatever it is, he should lose his life tonight. Frankly, the man was shocked at how confident the guy was, because in fact, he was in a bad position, but he was still making threats. He also realized that Oliver was deliberately stalling to wait for his colleagues from the Bureau. But so far it didn't bother Jack one bit, because they had been swallowing dust for him all his life, and today would be no exception. Then he decided to check where the guys from the Bureau were, and when he saw that they were very close he was shocked to say the least. This time they had gotten there faster than usual. In such a case, it was decided not to lose a minute, and as soon as possible to finish with Oliver, because if he did not make it before they came, there could be serious problems. After applying personal skills, the guy gradually began to be covered with a huge layer of ice from head to toe. As Jack watches the guy start to gradually lose, he gets more and more in the mood. Against this background, he even decided to admit that his main ability is ice, after which, completely froze the guy, and thus completely deprived of the ability to move. Of course he's not going to destroy the guy yet, because he needs to devour his body, so beautiful, young, and full of energy. In anticipation of the devouring, he even said out loud that he was grateful to nature for such an unearthly gift, because in any case, the man is already many years old, and needs to constantly devour someone to stay afloat. Just as this dark energy was about to enter Oliver's body, he suddenly broke the ice with his last strength, grabbed Jack by the hair, and gave him a mighty blow with his head right on his forehead. How much the boy rejoiced at that moment, for there was nothing better in this world than sweet revenge. Jack was trying to figure out what had happened, if Oliver had the iron head technique. The man had already lived hundreds of years on this planet, but never before had he met a man with a harder forehead than. The answer was pretty primitive. First of all, according to the Bureau's files, after every incident, there are large amounts of ice shards left at the crime scene where Jack was. Based on this information, the guy knew that in front of them was a man with ice powers, so when the man began to destroy everything around him, Oliver deliberately flew off the wall and secretly hit a small icebreaker. In short, he used a little trickery that saved his life. In this case, Jack decided to show that ice is a skill that has a large number of different uses. But anyway, so far it does not bring much success. At times it seems as if Oliver has a second wind, and now he fights much more effectively. This time, to escape another frostbite, the guy even used his web to quickly move from one end of the room to the other. After that, on the turn, he tried just like the previous opponent to catch in his net, only this time let them a lot more. Of course the idea was not bad, but unfortunately it was not successful, because Jack has much more power. He easily tore this web, and for a long time to hold him did not work. At one point the opponent was tired of such total humiliation, so he decided to use his most powerful skill. The essence of this skill is to create a huge ice corridor, and thus prevent the opponent from escaping. This time Jack was just sure that right now everything would end and he would be the winner. But even in such seemingly critical conditions, our hero figured out how to save himself. For starters, he threw out just a huge amount of spider webs, and make it so that it was literally on every centimeter of the ice tunnel. Also, so that the opponent did not suspect anything, the guy sometimes shot at him as well. When the task at hand was successfully accomplished, the guy was pretty exhausted. Of course Jack liked it very much, because he was already excited, and there was a nice bonus. But as they say, it's not that simple, because Oliver took a lighter out of his pocket. Now we will also test how a person with ice ability will feel in the middle of a huge fire. To save himself from a potential loss as soon as possible, the guy with a smile on his face as soon as possible throws her to the ground, and the whole area abruptly bursts into bright flames. Judging by the expression on Jack's face, he was not happy about such manipulations and already realized that there was nothing he could do in this situation. The situation was so desperate that the rival even decided to ask Oliver how to get out of it. In response to this, the boy said that of course he also does not know the answer to this question, but unlike Jack, he was not afraid at all, because he realized that he was giving his life not in vain, and with him will take such a dangerous criminal, the most interesting thing to see who will lose his life first. After these words, the man smiled slightly, and said that soon they would see each other again, but it could be that at the next meeting Oliver would not even recognize Jack. It is still difficult to understand what this means, but at least it sounds very interesting. The man disappeared without a trace. Oliver's joy was overwhelming. He couldn't believe that he had finally managed to scare the monster away. Because of the strong powerlessness, he fell to his knees and gradually began to see badly. Suddenly Marina came to his aid. As soon as Oliver felt the touch of her hand, he was immediately relieved, and he urged her not to worry, because the worst was over. She asked him how they could get out of here, because the fire was so big that it blocked all the exits and entrances. To be honest, the guy had trouble answering that question so far, but whatever the case, for some reason he was sure that everything was going to be more than okay. Just a few minutes later, the fire alarm went off, and with it the water to put out the fire. As soon as the opportunity arose, the guys were forced to run away, because the police will arrive very soon, and Oliver doesn't want to explain anything to them. Also, the most important thing is not to forget Charlie, because he is already waiting on the roof for too much time. As the fire was still burning in the corridor, and there were a lot of glass shards everywhere, the guy asked the girl to get on his shoulders as soon as possible, because it would be much safer and faster. In the process of escape, Marina remembered about her father. Of course he is not the best man, but she could not just leave him. In response to this, the guy said that there is no need to worry, because at the moment it is already safe here, he will not lose his life, and the police ambulance will arrive soon, he will definitely get help. As it turned out, there was another reason why the guy wanted to leave here so quickly. Pretty soon the guys should arrive, and if they see Oliver like this, they will immediately realize that he has some incredible power. So far the guy extremely did not want that to happen, so it's best to leave the knowledge. After a while Marina started crying loudly again. This time she was madly grateful to the guy for coming to save her. Oliver didn't carry crying girls on his shoulders every day, so he didn't even know how to handle them properly. As soon as the guy opened the door to the roof, he was immediately approached by Charlie, who asked him what was going on down there, because he heard some big rumbling and fire. In response to all these questions, the guy said that he had a run-in with 003, so he ran away. When Charlie heard the phrase 003, he was shocked to say the least, because he realized how strong an opponent he was, and what the odds were against him to stay alive. No one had any idea that he could be in charge, which made the mission to save the girl a little different. Then Oliver decided to ask Marina if she knew why 003 had kidnapped her. In response, the girl said it was because she was born in a dark year, a dark month and a dark time. In simpler words, the girl was perfect food for him. Jack also said a lot of strange words, but Marina already remembers quite badly what they know. In this case, Oliver assumed that most likely 003 will not let her go so easily. You should always be ready for another attempt, and know how to behave in such cases. At the moment Marina really has only two ways. The first is to stay here to talk about all this with the police and ask them for help. The second way, the girl will go after Oliver, start as before to go to school, and forget about everything that happened today. The Bureau will fully protect her. Not thinking long, Marina chose the second way, because she realized that in this situation the police will not help her in any way. In this case, Oliver decided to add that whichever option the girl chose, nowhere there is a 100% guarantee of her safety. But even with these conditions the girl still adheres to the second option, because she already trusts Oliver much more than the police. If you think logically, 003 will definitely not just give up, because his nature will not allow him to do so. And the guy already knows his abilities. All he has to do is find out where he is, and the next time it won't be a battle, because Oliver will come in much more prepared, and leave no chance for Jack to win. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of police have arrived at the hotel building and are getting ready to break in and start a full sweep. Charlie has left a black van downstairs and set up ropes to climb down in order to get out of the hotel. And you have to wear a harness to get down. But as it turned out, Oliver himself perfectly understands how it would be best for him to go down. He grabs the girl under his arm and jumps down together with her, then activates his web and lands down. From the outside it looked as cool as possible. Also at this moment the guys from the Bureau came to the hotel building. Before taking any action, they decided to check if there was any more energy there. After checking, they managed to determine that there was only one stream of energy left in the task at the moment.